Hi, welcome. Today we're going to talk about a flow proof. This is a different type of proof, and I really like it when we are trying to prove triangles congruent. It's very structured. It really helps you know where to put what information, and typically students really like these for this chapter. Now, a few things. When I was writing this, I had a hard time with the congruent symbol, so just all these equals are technically congruent symbols. Now, with Canvas, you can't draw in the diagrams, obviously. So it's very important that you take a piece of paper and you draw out the diagrams, or you put it in a Cami and you draw on the diagrams. So the first step before we even begin is to take the information and let's put it into the diagram to see what we're dealing with. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Angle 1 and 2 are congruent. In angle ABD, let's connect the dots. ABD, the vertex is at B. We'll put 2 slashes there. It's congruent to CBD. Now, I need 3 things to prove triangles congruent. Now, let's review. You need side, 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 angle, side, angle, angle, side, or HL. Now, currently, we only have 2 pieces of information. We need 3. 2 sides an angle, or so on. Now, there is a piece of information here that's kind of hidden, but it's there. So this side here that the 2 triangles share is a piece that we need to look at because BD doesn't change sizes. The segment BD for the left triangle is the same as the BD for the right triangle. So we talked about the situation last chapter. We said if a segment is congruent to itself or if an angle is congruent to itself, it's called being reflexive, a reflexive property. And so this is going to come back and we're going to use this now. So if you look at our diagram, we have 2 angles, 2 sets of angles, and a set of sides. So we have either ASA or AAS. We know all these others don't work. So before we begin, we have to know how we're going to prove the triangle is congruent. So it's about the placement of the triangle, or the placement of the angles in the sides. So since the side is directly in between the 2 angles, you have an angle, and the side's directly in between, this has to be angle, side, angle. Now what we're going to do is you're just going to explain how you knew which angle, how you knew which side, how you knew which angle. It's very simple idea. You're going to get most of the information from the given. So let's go back and see what we can fill in. Now when you think of a typical proof, like the left side is your statements, and then the right side is your reasons. Now, we're going to go away from this idea. If it's inside of the box, that is your statement. So, and if it's your reason, it goes underneath the box. So we're going to move away from this T-chart idea and say, okay, tell me an angle. I knew angle 1 was congruent to angle 2 because it was given. Okay, now I'm finished with this step. You're finished with each step once you show that something is congruent. Now, where's the side? Now, we talked about it. It's this red segment here. They both share in common. So BD is congruent to BD. And notice we already showed that something's congruent. So underneath it, you're going to tell me how you knew it. And we knew this because of the reflexive property. And lastly, how did you know the last angle? Well, it was given to us. ABD is congruent to CBD, and it was given. Now, when we get to other examples, we'll find that not every single proof will have one step. But for now, as you can see, there's always going to be 3 steps going straight down. The 3 steps are finished when you see a congruency symbol. And once you have 3 congruency symbols, we're going to bring these together. Just notice the little arrows. We're going to bring them together and say, this is enough to prove the triangle is congruent. So let's write a congruency statement. So this is where you take a triangle and you can pick the left one or the right one, put in any order you like. So I'm going to say A, B, D. Now the order of the second triangle is dependent on how you wrote the first triangle. So what corresponded with A? And correspond means they are the same measurement. If you were to put them on top of each other, they would match up. A, if you look at the diagram, and C correspond. So you put the triangle symbol in C. B corresponds with B and D with D. Now we need to put something underneath. How are we proving these triangles congruent? And we had to find that before we even started. This is angle, side, angle. Now, we're not finished. If you look up here, it doesn't even tell you to prove the triangle is congruent, which is needed, but that's not the entire goal. The entire goal is to prove BA is congruent to BC. So let's look at the diagram. So BA is here and BC is here. Now, let's think about this for a second. On any triangle, there are 3 sides. And on any triangle, there are 3 angles. So each triangle has 6 parts. But when we use one of these ways to prove triangles congruent, we're using 3 things. We're using like 3 sides, 2 sides in an angle, 2 angles in one side. We're using 3 things. So really, there are 3 things we have not talked about. So what's happening is they're going to give you one of the pieces, one of the angles, one of the sides that we have not yet talked about within the proof, and you're going to prove that technically they're congruent since the triangles are congruent. So let's go back and look at the diagram. Does everyone agree these 2 segments are corresponding and congruent? Yes. Are they from triangles that are congruent? Yes. Therefore, they have to be congruent with each other. So we have this big saying up here, and no one likes to write it out. Let's read it. Corresponding parts, these 2 are corresponding, they match up locations, of congruent triangles, and yes, they are congruent. We proved it right here in the middle of your screen. Therefore, they have to be congruent. Now, instead of writing out corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, we can write just the 5 letters, C, P, C, T, C. You need to know what they stand for, and you will be asked on homework and quizzes what it stands for, but you can reference it just by those 5 letters, C, P, C, T, C. So to recap, each proof will have 3 steps going down. Sometimes I even number them, like 1, 2, 3. You don't have to number them, but just so you see there are 3 steps. You need to know how you're going to prove them before you start. And then once you see 3 congruent symbols, you write a congruency statement that they all flow into. And then your last step is what you're proving, and it's going to be by CPCTC. Now, stick with me. There's 4 examples. Usually students really, really like these better than column proofs because there's such structure to them. You will like this by the end. Again, take your diagram. Let's put the information to the diagram. C is the midpoint of AD. So what that should mean to you is since C is in the middle, the left side equals the right side now. And we also know that AB is the same measurement as BD. But that's 2 things. We need 3 things. And let's remind ourselves, side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and HL. Okay, we need one of those to work. So where's another piece of information that's not given, but we can go ahead and mark. And you got it. It is that reflexive side there in the middle. So we are going to use side, side, side. Now, technically, you can put these in any order that you want, since they were all sides. Since I pre-drew the boxes out, I know that we need to put the first given here in the first box. C is the midpoint of AD. Given. Now, here's the difference between this and these up here. The proof that we did up here, after one step, we already were showing something was congruent to something else. But on this step, if you could read my bad handwriting, nothing is congruent yet. It just says C is the midpoint. Now, since we knew C was the midpoint, that told us this left segment and this right segment were equal. So let's list that. AC is congruent to CD. And why? Well, it's not given, because if you look up here, it doesn't say given. So let's backtrack. All right, so the information I knew before that was C was the midpoint. So this vocab word midpoint told me those two segments were equal because C was in the middle. So I'm going to say definition of midpoint. Okay, moving on. And we know these are congruent symbols. We know that AB is congruent to BT because it is given. And we are finished with that step because it is congruent. And let's backtrack. We know we were finished with step 1 because it is congruent. And then we have this reflexive side again. So just like before, BC is congruent to BC. And underneath, we're going to say it is the reflexive property. All right, so now you're going to bring everything together. There was an arrow here that I kind of wrote over. You're going to write a congruency statement. Now you get to pick left or right triangle, doesn't matter, put in any order. So I'm just going to say ABC. Now the second triangle has to be corresponding, so you have to say, okay, what corresponds with A? So if you go slow, like what's in between the 1 mark and the hashtag of 3 mark or 2 marks? So 1 and 2, that would be D. Using the hash marks will help you if the triangles are rotated. It does help. So B goes with B and C with C. Now you have to put something underneath. It's not given. We found this out in the very beginning. We proved it by side, side, side. And lastly, we're going to prove what we set out to prove. The angle A is congruent to angle D by the 5 letters C, P, C, T, C, corresponding parts, which they are. If you look up here, A and D, they are corresponding parts of congruent triangles. They are congruent because we did that here in the middle, are congruent. All right, so hopefully it's getting a little bit easier. As you can see, all the way down, you have congruent symbols. So you have 3 congruent symbols, then a congruency statement, and then what you're proving by CPCTC. Again, it's structure. And I really like structure when doing proofs because what usually students don't like is they don't know what to put next on the proof. Okay, before I even begin, I know that there should be 3 boxes. Now, I might have to go further than the 3, like, branch it out, but I start with 3. And then let's put the information into the picture to see how I'm going to prove it. BA is congruent to BC. BD bisects the angle. So bisect means it cuts it down through the middle. So let's find ABC. And it's going to cut it in half. So remember, B is my vertex. So I'm making the 2 little angles here. Now, that's all the givens. But I need more. So what else is there? Well, again, there's this side here that is reflexive. So let's go through our list. Side, 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 angle, side, angle, 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 side, or HL. I have 2 sides in an angle. So it boils down to either it's that one or it has to be like ASS, which we know doesn't work. So does it work? Do you have two sides that directly where they come together makes the angle? And you do. So we have side, angle, side. Okay, now again, technically it doesn't matter if you accidentally write one of these steps in the wrong order. As long as you have all the information here, I just like writing the S, the A, and the S over here on the left-hand side so you have some order to it. If you accidentally put it in like the order of ASS, it's okay because you still have the information for the sides and angles that you want. Okay, let's go through and do the givens first. Now this is congruent and that is congruent. So BA is congruent to BC, given. Now, are we finished with this step? Hopefully you're saying yes because there's a congruent symbol. Now, how did we know the angle? Well, they gave us some information. They said BD, come on, bisects angle ABC, and this is given, but we're not finished because nothing is congruent. So let's keep going. Because I understand the word bisects, an angle bisector, I understood it created two angles. So I'm going to have to name these angles. And unfortunately, these two angles up here are not angle 1 and 2. I need to use 3 letters. So this top angle on the left is ABD. And yes, you could name it DBA, as long as B is the middle letter. ABD is congruent. Now let's name the angle on the right CBD, or you can go backwards, DBC. B has to be the middle letter. Now, this is not given. Go back one step and say, how did I know this? Well, I see a vocab word, bisects. So this is either, you could say definition of bisector, definition of angle bisector. There you go. Now, you know you're finished with this step because you have a congruent symbol. Now, just like we have the past several proofs, we have a reflexive side. So BD is congruent to BD, and this is reflexive property. And we have a congruent symbol. So once you have your 3 congruent symbols, you are ready to write your congruency statement. So let's bring all this up together and we're going to write a congruency statement. Again, it doesn't matter the order. Make sure you put a triangle symbol. And I'm going to say ABD is congruent to, and A corresponds with C, B with B, D with D. Underneath it, I need to say how, and I already know it's SAS. And I did not prove yet what I set out to prove, so there's one more step. I'm going to say angle 1 is congruent, that's a really bad congruent, is congruent to angle 2 by those 5 letters, CPCTC. And you're finished. Hopefully you see they do get a little bit easier as you go. Things I cannot stress enough, though, is like over here that you have to figure out how you're going to prove it before you start. Otherwise, you don't really know what you're doing. And thanks for sticking with me because this last one is important because it doesn't involve a reflexive side. It's something we haven't really talked about yet. C is congruent. That is congruent with A, and CB with BA, and that's all there is. But I know there has to be 3 steps, right? So what do? I need to look at the diagram and see if there's anything that I can mark. Well, there's not a reflexive side, but I do see a certain kind of angle they have in common. I see they have vertical angles. And vertical angles are always congruent because of the vertical angle theorem. So, the list, SAS, ASA, AAS, and HO. All right, which of the following ways here are you going to use? You have two angles and a side, so it has to be AAS or ASA. And the side is directly in the middle, so that means it has to be ASA. All right, so let's do the information that was given, the easy stuff. Angle A is congruent to angle C. I said that backwards. C is congruent to A, and that is given. And I have a congruency congruency symbol, so I'm finished with that step. For my side, CB is congruent to BA, and this is given. And I know it's finished because it's congruent. But lastly, the new step, vertical angles. I need to name this angle. It has a vertex of B. Now, guys, if you just say B is congruent to B, that causes confusion. Don't do that because technically this angle appears B. You could do 100 or 180 degree angle that is B. That's confusing. So we're not going to do that. Let's back it up. Let's use three letters. You could say E, B, C. B, and notice is your middle letter, which is your vertex. And then for the other side, A, B, D. And yes, as long as your vertex is in the middle, the first and the last letter can be swapped. Now, there is a congruence symbol in the middle, which is good, but I need a justification to write underneath, and it's not given. So we're going to, don't say definition of vertical, because the definition of vertical only tells you like how they're formed. It doesn't tell you about its property. But we're going to use VAT, vertical angle theorem. Now, we're finished with this step, so we can go ahead and bring these all together and write your congruency statement. ECB. Now, I chose that order. Now, be careful. The order of the second triangle is important. E goes with D, C with A, B with B. Underneath, I have to write the way I'm proving it, which is angle, side, angle. And then lastly, what I was set out to prove. CE is congruent to AD by the 5 letters CPCTC. All right, so you have a couple of these for homework and for your quiz. Email your teacher if you have any questions. Thanks a lot.